I don't ever want to become famous. I had a friend say this to me once, and the idea of having everybody in your business all the time, losing your anonymity, and that constant pressure really had no appeal. For context, I think we were talking about YouTube influencers and the drama that comes along with being on that big of a stage. I was tempted to agree and just be like, yeah, totally. Never want to be famous. No, not for me, no thanks. And I mean, from my own observations, it definitely seems like having all that attention is one of the worst things that can happen to your mental health. You know, I've made a few things go viral enough to get strangers to comment and chime in, and even though I don't get that many negative comments compared to a lot of people on the internet, when I do, they're pretty seldom and mild and I delete them right away, they can still be sticky enough to be a bit of a buzzkill. Now, if I was the kind of person with hundreds of thousands of people reading what I write, watching everything I make, then I know those responses would also increase. And when you take them individually, they really aren't that big of a deal, but I can see how constantly receiving them, that takes some thick skin. That's something I hear a lot of authors say about not reading your own book reviews. If you have 99 5-star reviews and you only get 1 star, guess which one you're gonna perseverate on. It's easy to gawk at celebrities who have these really public meltdowns and stuff, but honestly, I don't think many of us know how we'd respond to having that pressure on us, having that many people always minding our business. So when my friend said being famous was the last thing she wanted out of life, I totally got it. And like I said, I wanted to say, yeah, I don't want that either. But I stopped myself because I end all my videos here on this note. Like, subscribe, do the good stuff. Be sure to follow me in all my other spots around the web. And like and subscribe. Like, subscribe, like, subscribe. See, I don't know if that's true for me. Even though I recognize all the reasons why having a bunch of followers, having a widespread influence is not desirable, the fact is, I keep asking for it. There's at least another half of me that kind of wants this. And look, you can pretty plainly see on all of my platforms that my presence isn't necessarily the biggest, but I have experienced posts going viral, floods of new people coming by, surges of attention, and it's exciting. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But here's the thing. These two beliefs and experiences do seem to kind of contradict each other. On one hand, I recognize all the ways that popularity and having a humongous audience can be bad for you, and on the other hand, I recognize how it can be kind of fun. And not just fun. Add this to the fact that what I do for a living revolves around building brands for social causes, nonprofits, activism, and creating movements. I do this stuff day in and day out, not just for myself. I've learned quite a bit about how to grow an audience, what kinds of things would put you on the fast track for that, and what things aren't so ideal. I could probably easily make a video course on how to grow your online audience, but here I'm taking a step back. I'm asking a different question. Should you? Let me dive into the things you gain, the things you lose, and the things I've learned about how to attract an audience without losing your soul. Assuming that's even possible. Let's find out. First, let's talk about what you lose by having an audience, because you do lose a few things. One big thing you lose is anonymity, and that comes with a huge threat to your mental health. And the nuisance is one thing, but after a while, I really do think this starts to take a threat to people's mental health.
You know, at the end of the night, when you come home, you want to relax. It's my space to do that. So I appreciate it. You guys do that.
A study a while ago by Jib Fowles found that the average lifespan for a celebrity was only about 58 years, well below the general population. The suicide rate was 4 times higher. We have a culture that incentivizes but then devours fame, and I think that's not just bad for us on an individual level, but kind of at a societal one too. There was this episode of Black Mirror a few years ago where everyone's ability to do things in life, take out loans, etc., was affected by their ratings on social media. And that kind of encouraged people to associate with other highly rated people to bring up their status and disassociate from low status people. In this episode, your rating was everything. It affected the kind of house you were able to live in, the type of car you'd be able to rent, who your friends are, and if your rating just got too low, you'd just get arrested. Like most Black Mirror episodes, it's kind of an exaggeration of stuff that you clearly see in the real world, but you know, you can also see how we're only a few degrees removed from what's going on there. For example, if you want to write a book, one of the first things a potential publisher might look at is your social media reach. Now, that number isn't exactly a strong indicator of whether or not you have something worth sharing or whether or not you're a good writer with something to say, but it does tell them about how many book sales they can anticipate, and that in turn affects how seriously your writing will be taken. Numbers that represent your popularity are more of a vanity statistic, but our world is becoming more and more built around those. There are a lot of things people do to try and game that number, attract attention and followers in a way that are very bad for building a healthy society. You might be thinking of milk crate challenges, any number of TikTok trends, like the one where people prepare ridiculous amounts of food in really wasteful ways. I get it. I get why you can't stop staring at something like that, but it's not good. I'm probably less concerned about those one-of TikTok trends that don't last that long, and more concerned over the fact that when you have more extreme views, you tend to attract more people. And so if you want to have the most popular podcast in the world, you'd favor black and white thinking over nuance. You'd want to become more of a shock jock with strong opinions, whether or not you have the lived experience. You'd prioritize snark over sincerity. And this dynamic contributes to destabilizing our world, making everyone a little more hostile, and I really don't want to play that game. A lot of creatives want to grow their audience so that their work can be seen by more people. I do too, and that makes total sense. But there's a big trade-off. In exchange, you do give up a lot of creative freedom. When I'm doing my creative work, the times I feel the most free and authentic and spontaneous and like I'm just having fun are often the times where I care the least about other people's reactions, where I just feel free to make and I do it. And in the past month, I've made some pieces of art that I'm really proud of. I've paired it with writing that I'm really proud of. And I've sent it off to Instagram, and it's gotten some of the worst engagement I've seen since the days that I had like a couple dozen followers. Now, I don't think it's me. I think these pieces just fell victim to some of the weird stuff Instagram's been doing lately with their algorithm and trying to be more video-based. And I know that sounds like an excuse, like, okay, keep telling yourself that. Those were just low performing or whatever. But really, I looked at the number of people who saw the post to begin with and saw that it was so low that when you look at the amount of people who interacted with it, it's actually a consistent percentage compared to what my posts used to get. And I look at that to know that sometimes these numbers don't reflect really well the type of work you're doing, the quality of it, the creativity. There are so many often arbitrary factors that make one thing more popular over the other that you can't buy too far into these popularity metrics. And you know what? Knowing all this helped me not be bothered by that low engagement. Like, I thought the art was good. I liked making it. I had fun. I thought the writing was good. And that was all I needed from that piece. You know, I've had other pieces be chart toppers, and that was fine, but this piece didn't need to be that. It was satisfying the way it was. The more of an audience you have, the more pressure you have to meet their expectations. Sometimes this pressure comes directly from the audience, other times it's simply self-imposed. I really do not envy people who have to follow up a creative masterpiece with a sequel, a second album, a second season of something. That's a lot of pressure. But sometimes as a creative, you want to evolve. You want to go in new directions, new spaces, and not everyone will be down for that. Not having to worry about that can be really freeing. With all that said, it seems like I'm ready to not care about audience size whatsoever, you know, to just give up trying to attract new followers, make whatever I want, and call it a day. Guess what? I can't say that honestly. I would be straight up lying to you if I said I didn't want my audience to grow. If you're not subscribed, go do that right now. Subscribe, follow, come on. That's just the honest truth. When I make creative work, I make it to be seen. I want people to see this stuff. I want my work to have a real impact on people. It sounds wrong to say I want to make people cry, but you know, I've seen people get misty-eyed at some videos I've made. I know I've tugged on somebody's heartstrings, and that is such a satisfying feeling to me, knowing that like I was able to connect to somebody on that deep of a level. And I've had people tell me that during a crisis, especially like global crises that we're just like looking at on the news day after day, my work or artwork has brought some clarity, provided a sense of not being alone in that. And those are some of the reactions I value the most. That's kind of why I make stuff. Every now and then I'll hear people say, hey, I make stuff for an audience of one, me. That's not true for me at all. If you do something creative for the sake of catharsis or to release something you have inside of you, if your writing is more of like a personal journal, or if you watercolor to relax or something like that, that's incredible. I'm glad you have a creative outlet that provides that for you. But also, this video is probably less relevant since an audience isn't really needed for that. When I make stuff, it's more for the sake of connecting with others, exchanging ideas and telling stories, kind of the way humans have done for as long as we've been human. One of the most positive things you can get out of having a big audience is just the chance to have an influence on the way other people see things. If you want to have a positive impact on the world or create something worthwhile, these are not tasks to be done alone. Chris Guillebeau refers to this as building a small army to accomplish your goals. And if that sounds too militaristic for you, just think, if you have this big goal, whether that's scaling the 7 summits or reversing climate change, you want to know who's with you. It's like the Forrest Gump thing. Just start doing something big enough, something new, unusual, ambitious enough, and people will start to follow. And I don't mean you have to think of this in terms of being like a creepy cult leader. You're not looking for supporters or worshipers. I don't think you are. But think of this. People do have a natural desire to be part of something bigger than them. People do have a desire to be part of something bigger, both a mission that's bigger than themselves and a community. And I can think of so many examples where this desire gets exploited for things like authoritarianism or conspiracy theories, but also this whole psychological tendency can be used for good. Nelson Mandela, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, these are some big and bold examples, but I'm also thinking of Casey Musgraves and how she once used her platform to drive business to a struggling family-run photo studio in Koreatown.
Casey Musgraves just turned this struggling mom-and-pop photo shop into an overnight sensation. Casey also told her 2.5 million followers that the owner was having trouble staying open now that everyone takes digital photos with their phones.
I help you. A lot of people call you.
The other thing is that having an audience can open some doors and bring in new opportunities. Sometimes having an audience is just necessary in order for you to do your thing. I mentioned before how your social media presence can often affect whether or not you'll get a book deal. And yeah, there's other ways to get one, but you know, if you really wanted to write a book, this is probably your quickest pathway and something worth investing in. I've gotten the chance to speak at conferences I enjoy, to present at universities, and these things came thanks to some of my online growth. There's other things I want to do in the future. I think it would be great to have like an online web series that just spoofs the absurdity sometimes of working in like a socially conscious startup or nonprofit. I'd love to make more documentaries about nature and culture and people. All these things I feel like would be more possible with a little bit bigger of an audience. To put it simply, having an audience opens doors. And yeah, some of those doors are altruistic things that make a big positive impact on the world, and other doors are just simply fun to have open. I have a friend with a good-sized Instagram following, and a few years ago she got invited by the Belize Ministry of Tourism to experience a bunch of ecotourism opportunities and then share about them. You know, I have friends who run like Bookstagram or Book Talk accounts, and they get to preview stuff early from authors I like. That's really cool. So I think there's enough pros and cons here to having a large audience to gaining in popularity that the question at the end of the day is simply, is it worth it? Are the things you gain going to be worth the things you have to give up? Now, sorry, I made this whole video to tell you that I can't really give you an exact answer to that. It's such a variable thing, person to person. It'll be different for different people. It's as individually based as mental health, which you know is unique to every person's situation. But hopefully some of these things can give you a better pathway for thinking about. But hopefully some of these things can give you a clearer pathway for thinking about it. And it's not a black and white, do I be famous or unfamous thing. I mean, how many of us even get to decide that? There are varying degrees of popularity, from like a mega star celebrity to somebody who builds a community on a social media network. I would not ever want to be as famous as Kanye West. That seems detrimental to what I actually want out of life. But I wouldn't mind having the reach of some of my favorite podcasters or YouTubers, for example, who've built a cool community around a shared interest. Beryl Shereshewski is an awesome example of this. I love her YouTube channel. It's all about the ways people eat food around the world. And because she's grown her platform to have an audience, she can get participation from all around the world. She can make videos where people in dozens and dozens of countries all have a late night snack together or contribute different ideas for how to make pizza. So again, is it worth it? Let me share with you some of the most valuable things I've learned about this whole audience influence thing. Now there's a much bigger question to be answered than how much influence do I want, and it's this. How am I using the influence I already have? Listen, as the world's problems and social issues have just been, I don't know, a lot more in your face these past few years, it's made me think more about how and when I speak up and on what sorts of things I speak up. I believe pretty strongly in the whole Elie Wiesel, Desmond Tutu thing, where being neutral or silent in an injustice is like the same thing as being on the side of the oppressor. And I realized that even though my platform might be relatively small, if I wasn't using it well with that mindset in mind, then I probably didn't deserve a bigger one. And I also look at some of the stuff I post online and I see that one might get 800 to 1200 views. That's not a lot, but then imagine being asked to give a sermon at a church or a performance at an open mic night with 800 to 1200 people in the audience. Now that's quite a bit, and I imagine you would choose your words and prepare your piece, your performance very carefully. Even when my audience feels small, I'm still trying to show up in that state of mind. Ideally, having an audience gives you a chance to continue doing what you love, again and again. This is perhaps what it comes down to for me. I don't need the biggest audience ever, but I do want one that allows me to keep doing the work I enjoy. See, when it comes to creativity or doing work, one of my biggest beliefs is that it's important to prioritize the product over the process. Per my last video, creativity is more about the process than the product. Our world places a premium on products, on finished products, at the expense of the creative process. The size of your audience, attracting new followers, those things are outcomes, and it might seem like in order to prioritize the process over the product, you should just totally forget about those things. But the thing is, having the right amount of followers does allow you to keep doing the work and thus sustains the process. And notice I didn't say a ton of followers, I said the right amount. Another idea I picked up from Chris Gillibo is this: if you're an actor, pair your indie movies up with your blockbusters. What does that mean? Pretend you're an actor and pretend you really care about the craft and the art of acting. You want to do more cutting edge, creative stuff. You want to be in movies that don't play it safe, that won't be for everybody, but that are important to you. You'll have a better shot at being able to make those if for every indie movie like that you appear in, you also show up in a blockbuster film. I kind of think Joseph Gordon-Levitt is probably a pretty good example of this. So many of his movies are like Brick or Premium Rush or Don John, which I think were all quite good but weren't very widely seen. And he also has this huge passion project of hit record. And he's able to do stuff like this because he's also in a Batman movie and an Inception and G.I. Joe and Angels in the Outfield. Back in the late 2000s when Judd Apatow's movies were doing pretty well, somebody interviewed him about his success, and what he said was basically, I just want my movies to be successful enough to have the opportunity to keep making more. And I like that, just successful enough to keep doing it. The single best idea that seems to vibe with both the things you lose and gain by building an audience is captured really well in what Seth Godin always talks about: building your minimum viable audience. That's a spin on the whole minimum viable product thing, basically finding what's the smallest amount of an audience you can gain that allows you to keep your work true to itself and to do what it does at an optimal level. Do you ever see ads like these or get spam comments from bots on Instagram promising you 20K new followers if you just send them a DM? Now, let's pretend for a second that this was a remotely legitimate offer and not some robo-spammer, and you say, yes, okay, you pay up, and then you suddenly see a shiny 20K right next to your profile picture where it says followers. I suspect that that wasn't exactly what you wanted, right? Like, that's not a meaningful number. Those accounts are probably not even real people. And even if they were, they probably followed you just because you put some money in the machine, not because they actually resonate with what you have to say, with what you're posting about, not because it's any sort of meaningful connection for them. Attracting an audience isn't just about a numbers game. You want to make sure you're winning the right audience. The right audience always beats out having the biggest audience. The smallest viable audience might not even be that small, but it's the smallest amount of core people who can allow you to keep doing what you're doing in a sustainable, meaningful way. This piece of advice seems to honor both the reasons why having a big audience is a good thing and why you should be skeptical of it. Going for the smallest viable audience rather than the largest number possible means you're making your stuff with very specific people in mind. You know you're not trying to please everybody, and this allows you to serve those you wish to serve in the best way possible. The ironic thing is that if you do this well enough, it'll probably lead to growth and a bigger audience down the line. Whether or not you want to build a big following can vary so much based on what your goals are and the other variables in your life. But whether you want that audience to be quite large or more intimate, whether or not you already have kind of a big following or you're getting there or it doesn't feel like you have anywhere near the size you want, just remember this piece. Whatever influence you currently have, just make sure you're doing some good with it, right? Everybody has some influence, even if it's not online, even if it's not showing up in metrics that large. The people around you, you play a role in shaping how they see the world. And so make sure you're using that influence in a positive way, kind of the way you would if you knew it was affecting people at a large scale. And remember, the right audience is more important than the size of your audience, and don't let any of that get in the way of enjoying the process. Alright, I already told you I end every video this way, so this should come as no surprise. If you like this, then please digitally like it, like wherever that like button is, and then go hit the subscribe button, which is usually next to it or something. If you've watched it this far, then I suspect you're probably a good fit for my audience, so follow along. I told you I would tell you to do that. Stay creative, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.